Through both government and commercial programs, virtually every part of the world has been imaged from above in an unbelievable level of detail. This has enabled us to view the Earth in entirely new ways, from strange natural forces to man-made structures. Let's take a look at the top 15 most interesting satellite images. Number 15. Antarctica Icebergs. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent on Earth, but because of its position that's almost entirely beneath the Antarctic Circle, it's also the most inhospitable, with around 98% of it being covered in ice that's on average 1.2 miles thick. As it's surrounded by the Southern Ocean, which is the most difficult region in the world to navigate, it's thought that the first time humans even saw the continent was in 1820, and it took another century until a team managed to travel across it. As with everywhere that has glacial ice, the ground is forever shifting, and at the edges, huge calving events often see gigantic icebergs being released into the ocean. While this process was known about, the sheer scale of it was hard to comprehend until the first satellite pictures were taken of it, and they continue to surprise every time new events are witnessed. The most recent series of images were captured in March of 2021 and show what happened after an event that took place on the Brunt ice shelf. The first known time this has happened in that particular region for 40 years. A huge crack formed, which released an iceberg that's known as A74, and it was absolutely enormous. Measuring 490 square miles, the iceberg is 20 times larger than Manhattan, and will now spend the next few years working its way through the shallow waters before eventually reaching the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, where there's a real risk of it interfering with shipping lanes. Number 14. The Korean Peninsula at night. The Democratic People's Republic of North Korea is one of the most secretive countries on Earth. Formed in 1948 following the failed attempt of the Soviet Union to take control of the region after the Second World War, it's politically at odds with most of the world, and the citizens are some of the least free people on Earth. With restrictions in place regarding who's allowed to visit the country, severe controls around any images or videos that can be captured to detail what life is truly like for people out there, it's sometimes hard to comprehend how different North Korea truly is. But a remarkable set of satellite images help to illustrate things. As a country that dedicates huge proportions of its wealth to military objectives, there's been a lack of funding to national infrastructure for decades, along with the inability to import fuel because of international policies. And this is best illustrated by the photographs of the Korean Peninsula and surrounding countries in Asia that were taken at night. As you can see, the artificial light being produced in Seoul, as well as across the rest of South Korea and China, beams up brightly into space. But North Korea is unexpectedly dark. There are only a few glimmers visible, based mainly around the capital city Pyongyang, where most of the country's leadership lives, along with a couple of military bases, and apart from that, it virtually blends in with the ocean. This all makes sense when you hear the statistics of energy consumption, however. In South Korea, citizens consume an average of 10,000 kilowatt-hours of electricity each year, whereas in the north, this figure is just 739. Number 13. Volcanic Eruption. Volcanoes are some of the most powerful natural phenomena that occur on our planet and are responsible for considerable changes to land formations because of the amount of material they can release during an eruption. There's believed to be around 1,500 active volcanoes on Earth right now, and while most of these are underwater, there are still plenty that are on land and close to where people live. In recent years, with the advent of mobile photography, incredible images have been captured of eruptions from around the world. And while these give a good impression of what it's like on the ground, it's hard to see from them just how large an event an eruption truly is. This set of images were taken by a satellite in April of 2021 when the La Soufriere volcano on the Caribbean island of St. Vincent erupted. The stunning photographs show huge plumes of smoke billowing up from the peak, with debris being sent high up into the atmosphere. Other images also show the ash clouds reaching nearby islands too, and these will prove vital to helping prepare for any future events. By understanding how wide the area of impact of an eruption is, plans can be made to provide assistance to everyone within the affected zone, as opposed to solely those who live near the slopes of the volcano. Number 12. Drought across the United States. No matter whether you agree with the general scientific consensus on the reasons behind it, there's no doubt that the Earth's climate is undergoing significant changes, and these have led to a noticeable increase in extreme weather events taking place globally. As with everything that takes place over an extended period of time, it can be hard to clearly see how different things have become, and satellite images can be instrumental to help illustrate this. Take, for example, the past year in the western United States. There's been such prolonged hot weather, along with reduced rainfall, that it's now technically classed as a mega drought. With farmers losing vast swaths of crops and some even having to move millions of fish to coastal areas because the rivers are becoming too hot, these images that were taken by the European Sentinel-2 satellite show just how devastating this drought has been. By comparing what it captured in the summer of 2020 to what was seen in the summer of 2021, the photos focus on the largest bodies of water in the region, such as Lake Mead and Lake Powell, which are two of the largest man-made reservoirs in the West. Millions of people rely on the water supply from these, but in recent months their capacity has fallen to lower than 35%, a level not seen since the construction of the Hoover Dam. Number 11. Algal Blooms. There's a lot we still don't know about our planet's oceans, and while it's a mammoth task to explore them all at sea level, satellites can be used to get an idea of some of the larger events that take place. Surprisingly, it's some of the smallest oceanic creatures that are actually visible from space, because when conditions are right, huge blooms of phytoplankton can develop. These plant-like organisms use chlorophyll to produce energy from sunlight, and are a vital resource at the bottom of the food chain. Without them, marine ecosystems would collapse, and they're also an important facet of the global carbon cycle, and are responsible for converting huge amounts of carbon dioxide to oxygen, with some researchers claiming they're more valuable in this regard than the Amazon rainforest. With enough nutrition and favorable temperatures, colonies of phytoplankton can become supersized, and because of the way they flow in the currents, they create stunning patterns. These images, which were taken over the Falkland Islands, show this in its full effect, where all of the lighter blues you see is in fact an algal bloom. Number 10. China's Area 51. Countries around the world have numerous secret facilities that they don't want other nations to know about, but the advent of publicly available satellite imagery has made this increasingly difficult. The United States, for example, has a base in Nevada called Area 51 that's part of countless conspiracy theories, but it's far from the only country that has somewhere associated with testing prototype aircraft that possibly uses alien technology. An image taken in June of 2021 shows a similar airfield being constructed on the edge of Lopnor Weapons Testing Range. Everything you see has been built since 2016, when the site was nothing more than empty land, and now there's at least 12 large buildings, along with a 3-mile-long runway. Hidden deep within the desert and likely housing a number of subterranean facilities too. It's believed that a top-secret space plane landed there in 2020, and experts say it's ideal for testing high-altitude aircraft, drones, and various other experimental craft for the wars and exploration of the future. Number 9. The Richat Structure. Quite often what we see at ground level is just part of the full picture of something, but there's nowhere that this is as true as in a mysterious part of the Sahara Desert in central West Mauritania, known as the Richat Structure. It's a 25-mile wide geological dome that's been eroded over millions of years to expose many layers of rock and precious minerals. There's evidence that humans have known about the structure for thousands of years, but when you're there, it's impossible to see that there's a groove in the ground, let alone how vast it is. Instead, people would have been attracted to the prevalence of valuable materials and fossils without ever realizing the greater beauty of the place. From space, though, it's simply stunning, and you can see the series of concentric circles, colors, and the depression in the ground compared to its surroundings. It truly is one of the most spectacular geological marvels the Earth has to offer, and one that we'd be unable to appreciate were it not for satellite imaging. Number 8. The Boneyard. Over the past century, nations have built thousands of aircraft to take part in military campaigns, but have you ever wondered what happens to aging planes that are now considered to be obsolete? They are such specialized pieces of equipment that air forces rarely want to sell them on to other organizations, and since the material they're made from is usually outdated too, there's little chance of them being recycled. Instead, they're often sent to an airbase to decay, and the largest of these is the 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group facility in Tucson, Arizona, on the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Covering an area of 2,600 acres, the site, which is often referred to as the Boneyard, holds a collection of more than 4,000 decommissioned aircraft and is believed to have at least one of every model that's ever been flown by the U.S. Air Force since the Second World War. Satellite images clearly show B-52 bombers that were retired following treaties signed with the Soviet Union, dozens of F-14 fighter jets, and plenty more. One of the reasons this location was chosen was because of its altitude and dryness, which means the aircraft don't decompose as quickly as they do elsewhere. This means it's one of the best sources of spare parts on the planet, and while it costs a fortune to run the place, officials claim that for every dollar that's spent on it, it generates $11 in return. Number 7. The key to a green future. With concerns around the world about our reliance on fossil fuels, both because of the extreme danger their use causes to our planet and because of their increasing scarcity and price of extracting what's left, there's now a greater push than ever to seek alternatives. One of the biggest changes we as individuals can make is to move from combustion engine vehicles to electric ones, assuming that the electricity is generated in an environmentally friendly way. But the components needed are extremely complicated. Underpinning these vehicles and other technologies like smartphones and computers is the need for high-capacity batteries, most of which use lithium ions. Lithium, however, isn't in free supply on the surface and has to be mined too, and these images show what a lithium production facility looks like. It's located on one of the largest salt flats on Earth, the Salar de Atacama, where 29% of the world's supply of lithium is. While on the surface it's covered in dry salt, beneath the surface is a huge reserve of brine, which contains large concentrations of the metal. Facilities like this pump the brine to the surface and into a series of evaporation ponds that are lined with plastic. Using the sun's natural warmth to remove the water, the lighter blue their color, the higher the concentration of lithium. Eventually, it's concentrated enough to remove and process and ship to battery manufacturers around the world. While it's undoubtedly a good thing that fossil fuel use will become a thing of the past, images like these show that even the alternatives that campaigners are trying to get us to use will also have their own environmental consequences. Number 6. Fires across the Amazon. The Amazon rainforest is the largest one in the world and actually accounts for more than 50% of what remains of our planet's rainforest. With an estimated 390 billion trees from more than 16,000 different species, it's one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. As with other regions like this in the world, however, there's a careful balance between the need to preserve them and the instinct of some people to plunder the region for all of its resources. There's clearly a huge problem with deforestation worldwide, and every year satellite images of the Amazon show just how extensive the issue has become. During the dry season, huge fires rage across the area and devastate huge swaths of prime rainforest. You might expect these to be naturally occurring events, but the sad truth is that the vast majority of these have been started on purpose. Some of the trees are so old that they're incredibly large and firmly rooted in place, which makes them very difficult for people to cut down. Instead, they simply let the fire do the work for them, and what remains is a large area of land freshly covered in ash that's fertile and ideal for planting crops. The difficulty for people trying to preserve the Amazon is that in recent years, activities like this have been supported by the government, which sees the forest as a valuable natural resource that can help sustain the economy. Until this thinking is changed, it'll unfortunately be a regular occurrence, and one that the rest of the world is helpless to try to prevent. Number 5. Bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef. For various reasons, but mainly as a result of rising ocean temperatures and the amount of pollution that's released into the environment, marine life is undergoing one of the greatest threats in our planet's history, and one that some researchers are already calling the beginning of a modern extinction event. This can be seen worldwide, with population numbers of various species being drastically affected, One of the most worrying signs is something called coral bleaching, whereby coral reefs around the world are losing their color and dying. As they form one of the best environments for marine species to thrive, the loss of these habitats will only speed up the problem, and satellite images show just how serious it's becoming. In 2016, for example, the largest reef system in the world, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, is believed to have lost as much as 30% of its total coral. The concern surrounding this has led to a number of organizations dedicating satellite time to observing the reef, and the images show the speed at which the reef is in decline. Bleaching events are being detected on the edge of the reef along its entirety, and you can clearly see this in the satellite pictures. If things continue at this current rate of decline, it's possible that there will be very little of the reef left within 2 decades, and the consequences of this will be unfathomable. Number 4. Burning Man. Humans are undoubtedly a highly social species, and there's nothing quite like meeting up with thousands of like-minded people to create unforgettable experiences. Often, some of the largest events are music and arts festivals that attract tens of thousands of people when they're held. But the most impressive of these has to be Burning Man, which is normally held every year in the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. With more than 80,000 people journeying to the site to take part in festivities that culminate in the burning of a huge wooden effigy, a temporary city is quickly built to accommodate everyone. Rows of cars can be seen along with a temporary airport for the wealthier visitors, and amongst the rows of the camper vans and tents there are huge sculptures and artworks. It is, of course, best experienced in real life at ground level, but it's a stunning sight to see from above, particularly in these satellite images. The size of the site and its remoteness is simply astonishing, and if you look closely, you might even see Burning Man's observatory, where people could well be looking directly back at the satellite that captures the pictures. Number 3. The end of the dunes. Around 1/5 of our planet's land surface is covered in desert, which is defined as a region that receives less than 10 inches or 25 centimeters of rainfall per year. Of course, there's great variety in these regions, with some being covered in vast areas of sand. But have you ever wondered what the edge of a desert looks like? In the Namib Desert, some of the dunes can be as tall as 1,000 feet or 300 meters. But amazingly, instead of the sand fading out, there are places where the border between the desert and surrounding landscape is surprisingly clear. These satellite images show the border between the part of the desert that's known as the Namib Sand Sea and where it meets the Kiseb River. Because of the way the water washes away the sand and the fact that during the rainy season it floods and soaks either bank, the sandy desert clearly ends along the path of the river, with the solid rocky land on the other side. This is one of nature's natural ways of containing the spread of a desert like this, and were this not the case, the Namib Desert could easily have become twice as large as it is now. Number 2. The United States at night. Depending on how you measure it, the United States is either the 3rd or 4th largest country in the world, with a size of approximately 3.8 million square miles. It's the 3rd most populous country, too, with around 331 million people, which gives a population density of 87 per square mile. The statistic is highly misleading, however, because people aren't spread evenly throughout the country. The eastern states of the country are where the majority of people live, along with the western seaboard, which has large swaths with very few inhabitants at all. One of the most astonishing ways of illustrating this is by looking at satellite images of the continental United States that have been taken at night, where the artificial light beams up into the sky and the more populated regions clearly stand out. You can see a particular focus in the main cities like New York, Washington, D.C., and California, while western regions are barely illuminated at all. Number 1. The Red Planet. Satellites have allowed us to map our world in ways that have never before been possible, and we've now managed to create an ever-evolving and updated record of what the surface of the Earth looks like. It isn't the only planet in their solar system that has high-resolution cameras orbiting it, though, and NASA has been able to create incredibly detailed images of one of our closest planetary neighbors, Mars. There are currently at least 8 operational orbiters that are monitoring the Red Planet, and they are providing an unprecedented insight into what the surface conditions are truly like. The process of mapping Mars began with the Viking orbiters that collected a series of incredible images for a planet-wide view, while recent probes with more powerful cameras have been able to image it with the same resolution we're used to on Earth. This has allowed us to see for the first time how similar Mars's surface is to the Earth's, albeit without the oceans that we have. But there are clearly features that have been shaped by wind and the flow of liquid at some time in the planet's past, such as mountains, canyons, and riverbeds. The weather on Mars is also captured in imagery, which shows how huge dust storms can occasionally encircle the entire planet. It's with records like these that researchers are able to understand what the conditions on the planet are like, as well as determining a suitable landing site, which will be invaluable in the future if we ever want to establish a colony there. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.